What's a bottom feeder like you doing in my place?" Those were the first words that greeted me when I arrived at my mountain lodge for Thanksgiving weekend. My own son, Daniel, was standing in the doorway, blocking my entry as if I were a common thief. Behind him, the warm glow of the living room fireplace, a fireplace I had built with my own hands, shone on faces I barely recognized. There were 6 people living inside my property, and none of them had my permission to be there. My name is Walter Henderson. I am 67 years old, a retired general contractor from Sacramento, California. For 35 years, I built homes for other people, but this lodge was different. After my wife Rebecca died of cancer 15 years ago, I was completely lost. We had been married for 30 years, and her passing left a silence in our home that I couldn't bear. Daniel was only 18 at the time, struggling with his own grief. I knew we needed something to keep us moving forward, a project to anchor our lives. So I bought 40 acres of raw mountain land in El Dorado County near Lake Tahoe. The land cost me $85,000. Over the next 3 years, I spent every free weekend building the lodge from the ground up. Every single board, every nail, and every stone of the foundation was placed by these hands. I spent $340,000 of my savings on materials and permits. It wasn't a massive estate, just a solid 2,200 square foot cabin with 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a wraparound deck looking out over the pines. But to me, it was a monument to survival. It was my sanctuary. For years, Daniel and I shared that place. I taught him how to fish in the nearby creek, how to use a hammer, and how to measure twice and cut once. I thought I was building a legacy for him. But then, 18 months ago, Daniel married Brenda. Brenda was a 28-year-old divorced woman with 2 kids, Leo and Mason, ages 8 and 10. I tried my best to welcome her into our lives. I even wrote a check for $38, zeros in to cover their wedding expenses without a single complaint, because I wanted my son to be happy. But Brenda came with a family that viewed my hard work as their personal gold mine. Her parents, Richard and Martha Vance, had recently lost their home to foreclosure after Richard's business went under. Her younger brother, Tyler Vance, was a part-time mechanic with a severe sports betting habit and an attitude to match. 8 months ago, Daniel came to my house in Sacramento looking stressed. He told me Brenda's parents were facing eviction and had nowhere to go. He asked if they could stay at the Tahoe Lodge for a few weeks, just until they found a rental. Just a few weeks, Daniel, I had told him, looking him straight in the eyes. It's temporary. They need to get back on their feet. Of course, Dad, he had promised. Just a month or 2 at most. You're saving our lives. I believed him. That was my first mistake. Now, standing in my own driveway after a 3-hour drive from Sacramento, I stared at my son. I had tried to use my key, but it wouldn't even turn in the cylinder. They had changed the locks on my property. "Daniel," I said, my voice steady despite the hammer beating in my chest. "Why is the lock changed? And what did you just call me?" "You heard me," Daniel said, though he wouldn't meet my eyes. He was 33 years old, but in that moment, he looked like a coward. "This is our place now, Walter. You don't belong here, Walter," I repeated. "Since when do you call me by my first name?" Brenda stepped up beside him, crossing her arms. She looked at me with an icy smirk. "We live here now, Walter. We've been here for 8 months. We've established residency. You can't just barge in whenever you feel like it. This is our family home." Beyond them, I could see the rest of the Vance clan. Martha Vance was standing in the kitchen, wearing a personalized apron. Richard Vance was reclined in my favorite leather chair, sipping coffee and reading the local newspaper. Tyler Vance was lounging on the sofa, his dirty work boots resting on the custom cedar coffee table I had spent 2 weeks sanding. He was holding a bottle of my expensive stout beer. "This is my lodge," I said, stepping closer. "I have the deed. My name is on the title." Tyler stood up, holding the beer bottle out mockingly. "Not anymore, old man. Ever heard of adverse possession? We've been living here, paying the utility bills and maintaining the place. We've made improvements. We converted that useless workshop of yours into a bedroom for the kids. Spent $1,200 of our own money on drywalls and carpet. Under California law, we have rights now. You're the outsider here. You destroyed my workshop?" My voice cracked slightly. That workshop contained my late father's tools. It was where I spent my quiet hours. They had gutted it without even asking. "We improved it," Brenda corrected sharply. And if you don't leave right now, we will call our attorney. This is harassment. We are occupants and you are trespassing on our peace. I looked at Daniel. Is this what you want, son? You're going to let these people talk to your father like this? In the house we built together? Daniel looked at the ground, shifting his weight. Dad, just go back to Sacramento. You have your apartment. You don't need this place. We're trying to build a life here. Just let it go. Let it go? I whispered. Yeah, old coot, let it go. Tyler laughed, taking a long sip of my beer. Get in your truck and beat it. I stared at them for a long moment. I could feel the heat rising in my neck, the urge to rip that door off its hinges and throw Tyler Vance into the dirt. But 35 years as a contractor had taught me that anger never solves a structural problem. You don't fix a crumbling foundation by screaming at it. You fix it with planning, tools, and force. Fine, I said quietly. I'll leave. I turned, walked down the porch steps, and got into my truck. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw Tyler and Brenda laughing in the doorway, while Richard Vance watched from the window. They thought they had won. They thought they had successfully stolen a $340,000 property from a confused old man. But they forgot one simple thing. I built that lodge, and I knew every single nail holding it together, and I was about to pull them all out. The drive back to Sacramento was the longest 3 hours of my life. My mind was racing, replaying every word my son had said. Walter. He had called me Walter. That hurt worse than the locked door. I had raised that boy alone since he was 18. I had paid for his college, helped him buy his first car, and paid $38,000 for his wedding to Brenda. I did it all because I loved him, because I promised Rebecca on her deathbed that I would always look out for our son. And this was my reward. When I got back to my apartment in Sacramento, I didn't go to bed. I went straight to my study and opened the heavy steel safe in the corner. I pulled out a thick manila folder labeled Tejo Lodge. Inside was the paperwork, the original deed, dated October 14, 2011, showing Walter Henderson as the sole owner. The construction permits, the occupancy certificate, and every single receipt for the building materials. But most importantly, I pulled out the property tax statements. I spread them out on the table. For 15 years, I had paid the property taxes on that land and the lodge. I had paid the most recent bill, $4,200, just 3 months ago. I had the canceled checks and the county receipts right in front of me. I sat down at my computer and started researching California property law. I wanted to understand exactly what Tyler meant when he bragged about adverse possession. What I found made me let out a cold, hard laugh. Under California Code of Civil Procedure Section 325, to claim property through adverse possession, a trespasser must occupy the land continuously for at least 5 years. They had been there for 8 months. But the most critical requirement under California law is that the adverse possessor must have paid all state, county, or municipal taxes levied on the land during those 5 years. They hadn't paid a single cent of property taxes. I had paid every dime. Furthermore, as I dug deeper into California law, I realized they had crossed into dangerous criminal territory. Under California Welfare and Institutions Code, CROV 15-6-10-30, financial abuse of an elder occurs when a person takes, secretes, appropriates, obtains, or retains real or personal property of an elder for a wrongful use or with intent to defraud. By locking me out of my own home, claiming they owned it, and telling people I had given it to them, they were committing elder financial abuse. And because they had claimed that I transferred the deed to them, any attempt to produce a fake document or even verbally represent a fraudulent deed transfer falls under forgery under California Penal Code, Section 470. Any such fraudulent transfer or agreement was legally void ab initio, meaning it was completely invalid from the very beginning. The next morning at 8 a.m., I called Evelyn Harper. Evelyn had been my real estate and estate planning attorney for 20 years. She was a sharp, no-nonsense lawyer who knew the law inside and out. Walter, she said when she answered. How was your Thanksgiving? I got locked out of my own lodge, Evelyn. I said. I spent the next 15 minutes explaining the situation. I told her about the changed locks, the Vance family living there, Tyler's claims of adverse possession, and Daniel's silence. I could hear Evelyn's pen scratching on paper on the other end of the line. When I finished, there was a long pause. They actually said adverse possession? She asked. her voice dripping with disbelief. Tyler Vance did. He claimed they have rights because they've been there 8 months and paid some utility bills. He also said they spent $200 converting my workshop into a bedroom. Walter, that is the most absurd legal theory I've heard in 20 years of practice, Evelyn said. First of all, 8 months is not 5 years. Second, they haven't paid the property taxes. You have. Paying the electric bill doesn't make you the owner of a house. Otherwise, every renter in California would own their apartment. And third, destroying your workshop without your consent is property damage, not a legal improvement. So what do we do? I asked. Legally, they are trespassers, Evelyn explained. Since you gave them initial permission to stay, they were technically guests. But the moment they changed the locks, refused you entry, and claimed ownership, they became unlawful occupants. Under California Code of Civil Procedure, Section 1161, we need to serve them with a formal 30-day notice to quit. This is the first step of the unlawful detainer process. It formally revokes your permission and orders them to vacate the property, and if they don't leave, then we file a formal lawsuit for unlawful detainer. The court will issue an eviction order, and the El Dorado County Sheriff will physically remove them and their belongings. Given that you have the original deed and proof of tax payments, this is an open and shut case. But Walter, because you are over 65, their actions also constitute elder financial abuse under Welfare and Institutions Code of CRAF 15.6.10.10.30. We can sue them for triple damages and attorney fees if they force this to court. I don't want their money, Evelyn, I said. They don't have any anyway. I just want my lodge back, and I want them to understand that they cannot disrespect me. I understand, Evelyn said gently, but we will use these laws as our leverage. I will draft the 30-day notice to quit today. We will have it served by a sheriff's deputy. That way there's a formal record, and they will realize this isn't a family squabble. It's a legal battle they cannot win. Do it, I said. I will have the paperwork ready by tomorrow morning, Evelyn said. Are you sure you're ready for this, Walter? Once we serve this notice, there's no going back. It will get ugly. Evelyn, I said, looking out my window at the Sacramento skyline. My son chose to stand by and watch his wife's brother call me a bottom feeder in the house I built. He chose them, so I'm choosing the law. Before I had the sheriff serve the papers, I needed to know how deep this lie had been planted. I decided to drive back up to the Tahoe area, not to the lodge, but to the small mountain town nearby, where I had done business for 15 years. My first stop was Cobb's General Store. Arthur Cobb had known me since I bought the land. He was the one who sold me the wood-burning stove for the cabin. Walter, Arthur called out when I walked in. Haven't seen you in a while. How's retirement treating you? Can't complain. Arthur, I said, leaning against the counter. Just getting some things sorted out. Well, I must say, that was an incredibly generous thing you did for Daniel, Arthur said, shaking his head with a warm smile. Most fathers wouldn't hand over a $340,000 mountain lodge as a wedding gift. Daniel was in here last month buying supplies, and he told us all about it. He said you wanted the next generation to take over. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. Daniel had actively lied to my friends. Arthur, I said, keeping my voice calm. I never gave Daniel the lodge. I let Brenda's parents stay there temporarily because they lost their home. Arthur's smile faded, replaced by a look of deep confusion. Really? That's not what Daniel said. He said he had the deed, and his mother-in-law, Martha, was in here boasting about how they were the new owners. She even put up family photos on the local community board, showing them around the fireplace. I looked over at the community board near the door. Sure enough, there was a printed photo of the Vance family standing in front of my stone fireplace with a caption. The Vance Henderson family, establishing our roots in Lake Tahoe. I still own the property, Arthur, I said. I have the deed in Sacramento. Arthur looked at me, and for a second I saw a flicker of pity in his eyes. It was the look people give to old folks when they think their minds are starting to wander. Well, if you say so, Walter, but Daniel seemed pretty sure. He said you guys had an agreement. I bought a pack of gum just to have something to pay for and left the store. Next, I walked down the street to the post office. Nancy Foster, the local postmaster who had handled my mail for 20 years, was sorting letters behind the counter. Walter, Good to see you, she said. I was actually about to call you. Martha Vance came in last week and filed a change of address form for the lodge. She registered utility bills and mail in Daniel's and Brenda's names. She told me you had signed the property over to them and that this was their new permanent residence. She was very excited about it. Did she show you any paperwork, Nancy? I asked. No, but she was registering official mail, Nancy said, looking puzzled. Is there a problem? She said you were giving them the place because you couldn't handle the mountain winters anymore. I can handle the winters just fine, I said. And I never signed any transfer papers. Nancy looked uncomfortable, shifting her gaze. Oh, well, she seemed very convincing, Walter. Everyone in town thinks they own the place now. My final stop was the hardware store. George Miller, the owner, had sold me the cedar planks for my wraparound deck. Walter, George said. Hey, I heard about the workshop. Daniel came in 2 weeks ago and bought $200 worth of drywall and carpeting. He said he was converting your old workshop into a bedroom for the kids. Said you'd retired from woodworking and wanted him to make the cabin fit his family. He even mentioned something about adverse possession laws, saying they had legal residency now. Adverse possession, I muttered. He actually told you that? Yeah, he said since they'd been there for months and were paying the bills, the law protected them. I thought it was a bit strange, but he's your son, so I figured you guys had worked out some legal arrangement. I walked out of the hardware store, my chest tight. They hadn't just changed the locks, they had conducted a systematic campaign to rewrite the truth. They had built a public narrative that I was a generous but fading old man who had handed over his estate. They were using my own reputation, my own friends, and my own son to paint me as senile. But their public narrative didn't mean a thing in a court of law. On Monday afternoon, I met Deputy Jenkins at the El Dorado County Sheriff's Department. Evelyn had arranged for him to serve the papers. Deputy Jenkins was a tall, stoic man in his 40s who had reviewed the deed and the tax records I provided. Mr. Henderson, Deputy Jenkins said, adjusting his belt, I've looked over your files. The property is registered solely in your name. You've paid all taxes. The occupants have no lease and no legal claim. This is a very clear case of unlawful occupation. Under California Code of Civil Procedure Section 1161, I will serve this 30-day notice to quit directly to your son and his family. Thank you. Deputy, I said, I want to accompany you. You have the right to be present, Jenkins said, but I must advise you to let me do the talking. These family situations can get highly emotional. I don't have any emotions left for them. Deputy, I said, I just want my property back. All right, Jenkins said, let's go. We got into our vehicles and drove toward the mountains. The weather was clear, but the air was freezing. As we approached the turnoff for my lodge, I felt a strange sense of calm. The foundation was solid, the tools were ready. It was time to start rebuilding at exactly 2:00 p.m. Deputy Jenkins and I pulled up the driveway of my lodge. A silver sedan belonging to Tyler was parked next to Brenda's SUV. They were all there. Deputy Jenkins walked up the porch steps, and I followed a few feet behind. He knocked on the door, 3 heavy, metallic thuds that echoed through the quiet mountain air. The door opened, and Daniel stood there. The moment he saw the tan uniform and the gold badge of the El Dorado County Sheriff's deputy, his face went completely white. His eyes darted from the deputy to me, then back to the deputy. Daniel Henderson? Deputy Jenkins asked, his voice booming and professional. Yes, Daniel stammered. I am Deputy Jenkins with the El Dorado County Sheriff's Department. I am here to serve you and all occupants of this property with a formal 30-day notice to quit, pursuant to California Code of Civil Procedure, Section 1161. He handed a packet of papers to Daniel, who took them with trembling hands. What is this? Brenda's voice shrieked from behind him. She pushed her way to the door, followed by her brother Tyler and her parents. Walter, what the hell is this? This is a legal notice to vacate the premises. Deputy Jenkins explained calmly. You are currently occupying this property without a lease or the consent of the owner, Walter Henderson. You have exactly 30 days from today to remove all your personal belongings and vacate the property. This is ridiculous, Tyler shouted, stepping forward. I told you, old man, we have adverse possession. We've been here 8 months. We have rights. Deputy Jenkins turned his gaze to Tyler. It was a cold, hard look that made Tyler instantly freeze. "Sir, I suggest you lower your voice. Adverse possession in the state of California requires 5 years of open and continuous occupation, and the occupant must pay all property taxes. Mr. Walter Henderson has paid every penny of the property taxes on this lodge. You have zero legal rights to this property. Under the law, you are trespassers. If you do not vacate by December 18, we will return with an eviction warrant, physically remove you, and your belongings will be put in storage at your expense." Martha Vance gasped, clutching her chest. "Walter, how can you do this? We have children here. Leo and Mason are in school. You're going to throw your own grandchildren out in the cold?" "They are not my grandchildren, Martha," I said, my voice dead and cold. "And you had 8 months of rent-free living to figure out your housing situation. Instead, you chose to change my locks and call me a bottom feeder. Dad, please," Daniel begged, his eyes filling with tears. "We can talk about this. We're family. You can't do this to your own son." "Family doesn't lock their father out of his own home, Daniel," I said. "Family doesn't stand by while strangers insult the man who built this place. The time for talking was 8 months ago. Your 30 days start now, folks," Deputy Jenkins said, stepping between us. "The notice has been served. I advise you to use these 30 days to pack your things. If you force us to return with a court order for eviction, it will go on your public records. You will find it extremely difficult to rent any property in California with an eviction on your record. Have a good day." We turned and walked back to the vehicles. Behind us, the door slammed shut, and I could hear the immediate eruption of screaming and shouting from inside the lodge. Over the next 3 weeks, my phone did not stop ringing. First, it was Daniel, crying and pleading. "Dad, please, Brenda is furious. She's threatening to divorce me if we get kicked out. Her parents are blaming me. They say I lied to them about owning the place." "You did lie to them, Daniel," I said. "And you lied to my friends in town. You made me look like I was senile just so you could play the big man." Then Brenda called, her tone shifting from angry threats to desperate begging. "Walter, please, we are sorry. We will change the locks back. We will rebuild the workshop. Just let us stay. The kids love it here." "No, Brenda," I said. "You wanted your lawyer involved. Now you have my lawyer. Deal with her." On the 15th day, Daniel showed up at my apartment in Sacramento. He looked terrible. His eyes were bloodshot, his face was gaunt, and he looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. "Dad, please," he said, standing in my doorway. "I'm begging you. Just give us 6 months. Just until the school year ends. I'll get rid of Brenda's parents and her brother. Just let me, Brenda, and the kids stay." I looked at my son, 33 years old, and he was still trying to negotiate his way out of the consequences of his own choices. He was willing to throw his wife's parents under the bus now just to save himself. "Daniel," I said, "when Tyler called me a bottom feeder on my own porch, what did you do?" He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing. I was just trying to keep the peace, Dad." "No. You were keeping the peace for yourself at the expense of my dignity. You stood there and let them insult the man who raised you, the man who paid for your wedding, the man who built that cabin with his own blood and sweat. You wanted my lodge, but you didn't want to show me the basic respect of an owner." "I made a mistake, Dad," he sobbed. "Please don't ruin my life over this." "I'm not ruining your life, son. You did that when you chose their greed over our relationship. The law is moving forward. Be out by the 18th. I closed the door on my own son. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. But I knew that if I backed down now, I would be agreeing to my own demise. I was 67, and I had built a life of hard work and respect. I wasn't going to let it be demolished by a spoiled son and his toxic in-laws. December 18th arrived, cold and gray. The wind howled through the Sierra Nevada pines as I pulled up the driveway of my lodge at 8 a.m. I wasn't alone. Behind my truck was Deputy Jenkins' patrol car, and behind him was a professional moving truck with a 4-man crew I had hired. The El Dorado County Superior Court had granted my unlawful detainer judgment 3 days prior. Today was the official enforcement day. "Mr. Henderson," Deputy Jenkins said as he got out of his car. "Are you ready? Let's get my house back, Deputy," I replied. We walked up to the door. Jenkins knocked, and this time he didn't wait. He opened the door, showing the signed court order in his hand. The living room was a disaster zone. Half-packed cardboard boxes were scattered everywhere. Richard Vance was sitting on a taped-up box, looking defeated. Martha was crying in the corner. Brenda was frantically throwing clothes into plastic bags, while Daniel stood in the middle of the room, looking completely hollow. "Time's up, folks," Deputy Jenkins announced. "The court order is in effect. You must vacate the premises immediately. The moving crew will begin loading your remaining items into the truck. They will be taken to a secured storage facility in Placerville. You will have 30 days to claim them." "This is illegal," Tyler Vance yelled, storming out of the kitchen. "You can't just throw our stuff in a truck!" Deputy Jenkins stepped forward, his hand resting casually near his handcuffs. "Sir, if you interfere with the execution of this court order, I will arrest you for obstructing a peace officer." "Step back." Tyler looked at the deputy, then at the handcuffs, and finally shut his mouth. He grabbed a suitcase and marched out the front door, cursing under his breath. For the next 3 hours, I stood on the deck and watched the moving crew empty the lodge. I watched them carry out the furniture they had used, the clothes they had scattered, and the toys of Brenda's children. It was a bizarre, clinical process. The Vance family stood in the driveway watching their lives being loaded into a truck. At one point, Brenda walked out of the kitchen holding a cardboard box. Through the top, I saw the blue ceramic dishes. "Leave the dishes, Brenda," I said. She stopped, glaring at me with eyes full of hatred. "What? These are just dishes." "Those are my dishes," I said. "I bought them for this lodge 12 years ago. They stay with the house." "You old miser," she screamed. She pulled one of the blue plates from the box and threw it onto the wooden deck. It shattered into a dozen pieces. "There, take your stupid plate. Ma'am, drop the box and step away," Deputy Jenkins ordered, stepping toward her. Brenda slammed the box down on the deck, grabbed her purse, and stormed down the stairs to her SUV. She didn't look back. By noon, the lodge was completely empty, except for the heavy cedar furniture I had built into the structure. The movers locked the truck and drove away. The Vance family got into their cars. Daniel was the last one standing in the driveway. He walked over to me, his shoulders slumped, looking like a ghost. "Well, you won, Dad," he said, his voice cracking. "You got your lodge, but you lost your son. I hope it was worth it." I looked at him, feeling a deep, painful ache in my chest, but my voice remained firm. "I didn't lose you today, Daniel. I lost you 8 months ago when you let these people change my locks, call me names, and try to steal my life's work. You chose them. I just chose the truth." He didn't say another word. He got into his car and drove down the mountain. I spent the next 2 days changing the locks to a new digital system, repairing the drywall in my workshop, and cleaning the lodge. But as I sat by the fireplace on the third night, looking at the empty rooms, I realized something. The silence was peaceful, but the lodge felt different now. The memories of building it with Daniel had been overwritten by the memory of his betrayal. The walls felt tainted. I knew I couldn't stay here anymore, but I also knew I didn't want to sell it. I didn't want to turn my labor of love into cash, so I contacted the California Veterans Alliance, a nonprofit organization that helps veterans struggling with PTSD and combat trauma. I met with their director, Victor Higgins. "Mr. Henderson," Victor said when we signed the donation papers 6 months later, "this lodge is incredible. The mountain air, the quiet, the forest. It's exactly what these men and women need to heal. You are giving them a priceless gift." "They earned it, Victor," I said. "They understand what loyalty and respect mean. I'd rather this place be filled with heroes than thieves." 3 weeks after the transfer, Victor invited me back for a small opening ceremony. I stood on the deck, watching a group of veterans sitting around the stone fireplace, talking and laughing. A young female veteran named Sarah, ironic, I know, walked up to me, holding a cup of coffee. "Mr. Henderson," she said, looking out over the Sierra Nevada Valley, "I wanted to thank you. I served 2 tours in the Middle East, and I haven't slept more than 3 hours a night in 2 years. Last night, in that back bedroom, I slept for 8 hours straight. The quiet here, it's the first time I've felt safe since I got back." I felt a tear well up in my eye. "You're welcome, Sarah," I said. "This place was built to be a sanctuary. It just took me some time to find the right people to use it." That evening, I drove back to my apartment in Sacramento. My phone rang. It was Daniel. He was calling from a cheap, 1-bedroom apartment in Fresno. Brenda had left him 3 months after the eviction, and her family had abandoned him the moment the free housing was gone. "Dad," Daniel said, his voice sounding hollow. "I heard from Arthur Cobb. He said you donated the lodge. You gave it away to a veteran charity. Why would you do that? That was supposed to be my inheritance. That lodge was worth $340,000. "Daniel," I said quietly, "an inheritance is not a right. It is a gift built on respect, honor, and family loyalty. You chose to forfeit all of those things when you tried to steal from me. You can't inherit a legacy you helped destroy." "But I have nothing left," he cried. "Then I suggest you buy some tools, find a piece of land, and start building something of your own," I said. "Maybe then you'll understand what it takes to earn it." I hung up the phone. I sat in my quiet living room, looking at the photos of Rebecca on my shelf. I knew she would have been sad about Daniel, but she would have been proud of the lodge. It was finally doing what it was built to do, helping people find peace. And as for me, I had my own peace, and no one would ever take that away from me again.